Welcome back, guys. We are on for the last show of the day. We've shown a number of podcasts. Today, we have the one-man band who outsells corporate teams with Martin Siddle. Martin Siddle, you were the head of sales at Maluma a while ago. Now you're the founder of SN25 Sales Agency. And this is going to be a raw, honest conversation about why 35 years of selling into one niche beats any corporate playbook, why rigid sales processes create quieter salespeople, not better ones, and what happens when a one-man band decides to do things his own way. I love that. So everyone talks about scale. They talk about hiring reps. They run more playbooks, automate everything. But our guest today, he spent 35 years selling into one market, the UK legal sector, mostly as a one-man band. He's managed 50 plus large law firms at LexisNexis, launched his own sales agency, and he's got something to say that a lot of corporate sales leaders won't want to hear. Your frameworks are making your salespeople worse. Martin Siddle, welcome to the RevIntel Podcast. Tell us what you do, why you do it, and why anybody listening should stay on for the next hour to hear what you have to say.
Hi, Shane. Yeah, good to see you. What do I do? Like you say, I had 30 years working for LexisNexis, large corporate legal tech company. I hit 60 and thought there's a better way of doing this. So I formed the sales agency, SN25, and the idea was to try and find ways to help smaller tech firms break into the legal space, but without the corporate backing of forecasting and just, making stuff up to keep the managers and the shareholders happy, but actually concentrating on the real deal and how you can get deals over the line quicker without having to not lie, but make up where you are in the sales process.
Absolutely. So you've spent your entire career in UK legal, LexisNexis for 14 years, your own agency. Is it now Maluma? Are you now at Maluma?
No, Maluma is one of my clients.
Okay.
I've worked with these guys for a long time. They've been going 11 years, but they've never really cracked it. And so we're at a point now where we've either got to change things or we've just got to accept the status quo. And I think what we want to do now, we want to change things. We want to up our sales effort. We want to approach people in a different way. We want to make people curious about what we do rather than just coming across as a commodity sale.
Absolutely. So most people will call that quite narrow. It'd be a riches in the niches. What does 35 years in one vertical give you that a generalist rep will never have?
A very, very good blank book. Broad than that, it gives me a very good knowledge as to what sells, what doesn't sell, what lawyers are looking for. It also allows you to see what's been before and failed and learn from those failures. So the next time around, you've got more chance of success. The legal community is really good. I mean, the people in it are really nice, good people. They do embrace the right technology, although they can be slow in making decisions. But I think it's that understanding how someone works, why they work in that fashion, and what's going to make something work for them to make their life easier.
So that's interesting for me because law firms, I worked at a company called C5 Communications in 2017, and they were a heavy player in legal and compliance events. That was where I first got my first gist, my first idea of who the big four were. So the major sponsors of their events were always EY, KPMG, Deloitte, and PwC, always KYC events, sanctioned events, Iran sanctions. All of those events were really, really big. And these guys would spend it was inbound leads, and they would say, we want to go to this event, and they would pay for 5 to 10 lawyers to go to these events. And we were like, it was the easiest commission I'd ever made in my life. That was where I figured oh my God, this is really cool. And then I went to a chop shop that I had to search my own leads, and it was really, really hard. But law firms are typically quite slow, risk averse, committee driven. What's the playbook for selling technology into a buyer like that? What works in legal that wouldn't work in a typical SaaS sale?
I think you've got to know your audience. So a lot of people try and sell into IT. Now, currently in legal, the IT tend to be facilitators rather than buyers.
Okay.
So you've got to find the people that are going to use the solutions. And that tends to be the partners, department heads, and you've really got to understand what's stopping them from doing their job. And it's not always pain. We always say find the pain.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's actually find their ambition. What do they want to get out of this? What will make them look good in the eyes of the other partners? What will make
Hmm.
them look good in the eyes of their clients? And I think if you can get to that understanding, you've got a better chance of selling your solutions.
I think that was look. That was one of the highlight kind of notions or the highlight talking points of the previous podcast. It was we are on this trajectory, this path that we've been taught. Really, it happened. I think somewhere in the past 15 years, where selling to pain was what we are taught. Right, find the problem, but some people are not dealing with the problem. Some people are looking to propel themselves forward, right? And propel themselves to a new or change, right? Change, transformation. And that doesn't always necessarily come from that. So how do you kind of work around that? Like what is your kind of approach when that takes place?
I think it's really getting to know your prospects and understanding them. We had a really good example. I was working for an AI startup and we were working with this law firm and they really weren't in our wheelhouse and they didn't look like the right sort of clients.
Hmm.
But the more time I spent with the senior partner and the more I got to know him and understand, he just wanted it to make his firm look approachable to get bought out. And nobody had thought of that until
Hmm.
we actually sat down over a cup of coffee and had an honest conversation about, right, we don't think you're right for us. You tell us you want this system.
Hmm.
What's the truth? And once we got that, it was such an easy sale because we knew what his ambition was.
Of
So I
course.
think talking to people, getting under their skin, finding out what makes them tick is as important as knowing what your solution does.
I agree. I agree. And in legal, a buyer can stay engaged for months and actually
Yeah.
never buy. That's actually what happened. It was a situation where the previous guest, he was talking about a truck. He had a truck. He used to carry his bike on the truck. Somebody crashed into his truck. He had been meaning to buy a new truck for years. And he actually went and looked on through a whole day, a couple of weeks actually, to buy a truck. 11 dealers he went through. One dealer sold themselves out of the deal. So he didn't even end up, he has a crash truck and he ended up not buying one just because how poor the sales process was across 11 agencies. So what we end up asking is, how do you tell the difference between a deal that's moving and one that's just being polite? What's the signal you look for now that you completely missed early in your career?
I think I always took people at face value early in my career without having digging below the surface.
Hmm.
And again, I think if you think you know the process, you probably don't know the buyer's process. There's always something there that they're not telling you. And
Yes.
again, it's getting into those people. We had another situation whereby we dismissed somebody in the room. They didn't seem that important. They weren't particularly engaged. And yet when we lost the deal, we found out that was the person that made the decision. And we just didn't spend enough time listening to them and understanding what they were trying to get out of the situation.
That's unfortunate. And would you say, at what point in your career did you kind of discover I need to look out for that? Was that the situation there? Was that the one that
That
was the
was
eye opener?
that was the one because as always, I told my boss that was the one that was going to come in. It was in my forecast. It was guaranteed to be delivered. And you've got to explain why it didn't deliver. So yeah, that was a big wake up call that
Okay.
you can't just assume your main contact is the right.
I agree. I agree. One thing about corporate sales is I think corporate sales is broken. I still remember the firm C5. It was a legal and compliance small boutique firm, and they had their business ran so well. It was the first time I saw qualified leads come from marketing. Sales were able to capture it in a modified process, optimized process, call them and book a deal. And people were winning. And then I went to a bigger company, Global Data. They're an intelligence company owned by Mike Danson, and they are a huge, enormous, enormous vehicle, and the only technology they had is a CRM. Salesforce is a CRM. No technology, not even phone technology. It was so poor. And I just saw that the time where they screwed up a client campaign and they did not there was no accountability in it, I quit and I never went back. So you've said most salespeople aren't struggling because they're lazy. They're struggling because they're forced to follow processes that don't match how buyers actually buy. You spent 14 years inside the machine at LexisNexis. What did you see that convinced you the model is broken?
I think it's that putting stuff in the CRM for the sake of putting stuff in the CRM. So had been dragged into those forecast meetings where you know you've got to say a certain thing, even though deep down you don't believe it. And
But yeah,
you're only saying it so that your boss can tell his boss and can tell his boss and keep everybody happy. You've been there yourself where they say, you've not got enough leads in the CRM.
hmm
You artificially boost up those leads. 3 weeks later, they say, there's too many leads in the CRM. Go through and tidy it up. And you go through and tidy. And the hours that you waste trying to follow the process when the process makes no sense, when what you should be doing is working on those deals that you know are true deals and are going to come in when you say they're going to come in. When I was in sales management, I was probably the worst manager, but I wanted to spend time with my sales guys to understand where they were in the process, where they thought they were in the process, and work with them on individual deals rather than just stuffing the CRM with irrelevant information.
look, I agree with that too. And you wrote that inside most orgs, pushing back on a forecast gets you labeled not a team player. I went through it myself. That corporate environment doesn't create better salespeople. It creates quieter ones. I'll give you an example. Just when you said that, I still remember that to this day, the sales director, Mark Leach, yeah, I had like dominated sales for a new starter for a good 15 months, killed probation, hit my first year. Second year was off to the races. And I remember pipeline, I was working in oil and gas and pipeline had dried up. And he said, what's in the pipeline this week? Everybody send me your forecast by 11 a.m. And I sent him 2 deals that I thought were going to be the right deals. And that was me being honest. This is the first time I had to break honesty and break integrity. So I sent him those 2 deals and he said, I thought you said your target is this. You're supposed to have this many deals. I said, like, mate, this is what is going to come in. Like, do you want to know what's going to come in or do you want me to lie to you? He said, make it look like it needs to be.
Yeah.
Basically, right? For lack of better words. So I added 3 companies that weren't even real. And I'm like, what the hell is the point of this? So what does that actually look like day to day when you're pushing back on a forecast, gets you labeled not a team player. Again, it doesn't create better salespeople. You get quieter, you push back and you start looking for other positions. What does that actually look like day to day?
I think it's okay if you're an old soak like me because you can survive it. But I think for the junior guys or the guys that are just coming into sales, it's demoralizing because they know they're being held account to something that doesn't exist. And I think what sales management should really be about is nurturing and working with your sales guys, getting so that you understand what the proper deal is, so they understand what a good deal looks like, so you can help them identify the block, work out why it's not going to plan, have a plan B if plan A fails. And unfortunately, a lot of the sales managers I had, it really was about running the spreadsheets and running the CRM. And a lot of them didn't have any sales experience. They had been promoted into that position.
Yep.
So you're almost educating the managers. And again, that's a difficult thing to do when you're just coming into sales or you're a junior person in the organization.
I remember for myself, the first time I got a promotion to a team leader. I wanted to override so bad, right? I was a business development manager. I hit my target and they said, it's very different being a manager and having your own rep just working for you. You have to teach them. Yeah, I got it under control. No problem. And it was this bright guy. He was like a replica of me. British Asian guy, really driven, really motivated, but just didn't listen. Again, similar characteristics of me, just did not listen. And I spent 7-8 months with this guy. And every month he was like, Shane, you got to cut him. He's not doing what he's supposed to do. No, I believe he's going to do it. I can do it better. I know myself. I know it. I can do this. And 8 months in, it was a really, really disappointing kind of outcome. So I realized it myself very, very quick. And you've been on both sides right now, inside the machine where reps fill in fields to keep managers happy, and outside it where you see what's real. If nobody feels safe enough to challenge the numbers, how much of what gets reported as pipeline is actually going to close?
I reckon you could be as low as 25% reality. We've all had those deals that you keep just pushing out to keep it on the CRM system to make, one day this is going to close. But I think, if you've got good 25% and you close that 25% and you hit your target, that's what you should be allowed to do. You shouldn't have to exaggerate what's in your forecast just to keep somebody else in a job.
I agree. So Maluma, just won a contract with an Australian law firm, if I'm right, to migrate their data between
Yeah.
systems. You're not selling software, you're selling, we'll make sure, in quotes, we'll make sure you don't lose everything when you move, out quote. How do you create urgency around a problem people would rather ignore?
See, that's really, really interesting question. So in this particular one, they've got a burning bridge. They are changing systems. They've got a deadline. So that's an easier one to get across the line.
Hmm.
But we have other systems which are based around data archiving and deletion of data. And that gets pushed on the too difficult pile way too many times. Yeah. You know what it's like? It's like, yeah, we'll get round to it at some time. No one's crying for it, even though you know you've got to do it.
Hmm.
And I think there, again, it's about finding the real reason why they're doing nothing. Is it they haven't got the capacity, they haven't got the power, they haven't got the desire, there's no legal reason to do it, they know it's the right thing to do, but they can't persuade anybody else to do it. So again, it's not selling to IT, it's trying to find someone in the organization
Hmm.
that has an interest in that.
Hmm.
Quite often it's compliance.
Hmm.
Compliance is great. They always say there's no budget in compliance. If you've got to do
Yeah.
it, you've got to do it. So trying to find somebody outside your normal circle contacts to actually get them interested in it. Now, use your contacts to get to that person,
Hmm.
but don't always rely on the same people to get you different deals.
I agree. So from corporate to one man band, you went from 14 years at LexisNexis to doing it all yourself. What was the biggest adjustment and what surprised you about how much better it could be?
Two things. The biggest adjustment was not having a team. And I think that was just missing someone to bounce ideas off.
Agreed. I'm with
Someone
you
to
on that.
pick up on a Friday night and say, do you know what, I've had a terrible day. Do you want a beer? Let's go talk about it. So that was probably the downside. The upside was I got to work with people that I like and admire. And I didn't have to take on work for people that I didn't want to work with. So it allowed me to concentrate on what I'm good at, but without the need to go and do stuff to please other people.
Hmm.
And I really, really enjoyed it. I worked with some really interesting organizations. I worked with some Australian organizations, some Nordic organizations, some UK organizations, startups, people that had been around a long time and were struggling to see traction, people that had lost their sales director and just wanted a short, fill-in gap. So it was all that. Every project was exciting.
Hmm.
And you don't always get that in corporate world, do you?
No, you definitely don't. You absolutely don't. And I think it segues into one of the the last two questions. You've launched a free mentoring service for individual salespeople. No cost, no methodology, no scripts. You said salespeople rarely get unbiased help because inside companies' advice is always tied to targets or optics. Yes. What are you hearing from them that made you feel this was needed?
I think it's about giving back. I was talking to somebody earlier today and they were saying, at the end of your career, what do you want to do? And I think if you've been successful and you've been around in one location as long as I have, giving back is the right thing to do.
Hmm.
And there are so many people that are entering sales or young salespeople that don't have a mentor, for want of a better word. They don't have anybody they can pick the phone up and say, do you know what? I've just hit a brick wall. Internally, there's nobody they can talk to because you're back on that. Got to get your forecast, got to get your numbers, got to have your ratios sorted out. So I just thought if I offered that to individual salespeople, didn't matter which industry they're in, just somebody that they can pick up the phone free of charge and just have a chat and say, can you help? What about this? What do you think about this? What would you do in this situation? I thought that would be a really interesting way of saying a final farewell to my sales career. So it's out there. Nobody's accepted the offer yet, but I'm going to keep pushing it. So if anybody's listening to the podcast and wants just someone, a sounding board or a mentor or just someone to bash ideas around, you can find me on LinkedIn and I'll be more.
That's awesome. Last question for sales leaders listening right now who are running their teams on rigid frameworks and wondering why their best people are going quiet. What's the one thing they should change this week?
Have an honest conversation and don't make people feel bad for giving you a nice answer.
I'll wrap it up on this. I remember it was 2 years ago. I confided in the person that hired me for the business, telling him, "Hey, things are getting hard." It's always, it's always yeah, you can call me. I'm here to help you. And mate, in literally 2 weeks, I had left the company because of how much it was like, you be vulnerable to somebody and you give them a bit of thread and they take the whole yarn and then they rip it up and cut it with scissors and burn it. And I'm like, wow, like and you kind of know, like there's some piece of you that the notion, it, right? The gut feeling is that don't say it, don't say it. And then you're like, and it comes out and then you're like, oh my God, like this guy was actually a really, really horrible guy. It's not an empathetic person. He's actually a snake and he's ousted me out of confiding in him, and that for me was probably my biggest wake up call, and why for me my own journey. I still remember I had 3 years. I earned the most money I've ever made in my life, but I was the most at the end of it. I was the most miserable because I had no control. I had no control over the outcome. My integrity was being diminished day by day. And it was a point where, where just like everything is you're just bashing heads with every single thing. And it gets to a point where you're just like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm out. And that's kind of how I left it. Any last word, God?
No, I think you're right. Sales can be a lonely place.
Very lonely.
And you've got to appear confident. Oh,
It's all right, God.
I'm glad you did that rather than me. So, yeah, you've got to appear up and confident at every single step of the way. And we all know there are days when you really aren't.
Yeah.
You've been let down, a client's delayed, a client's cancelled, you've lost to the competition, and yet you've still got to give that front. And I think if there was a way that salespeople could talk, either internally or externally, to someone that was prepared to listen and not use that information against you,
Yeah.
I think you'd hang on to your better people longer. You'd get better results. You would grow that sales force into a real winning team. And I don't think enough people do that. So that's my final thought.
I think that's a great way to wrap it up. Well, look, that's the pod for today. Thank you very much, Martin, for joining. I appreciate the kind words. And that's it for today. We'll see you on the next one.
Cheers, Ray.
Thank you very much for taking the time to watch this episode and staying here the whole way through. If you like what you saw, click subscribe. It'll take you 2 seconds. It helps me reach amazing guests and deliver valuable content for you. And if you ever want to find out what we do as a business, go to www.gorevintel.com, and that is the place where we help you make decisions that are backed by intelligence, and it's for founder CEOs. That's it for me for now. I'll see you on the next episode. Bye.